Well, hello, hello. Welcome back to Mistress of the Damned. If you are new here, welcome. Nice to meet you. This is the channel where we believe all knowledge is worth having and freedom of speech is our most important right. If you believe that too, then you are most welcome here in hell. I am your Mistress Katrina. I will be guiding you through your journey of the 21st century. Boy, life has gotten weird, right? Australia has turned to absolute shit. They are going full authoritarianism and destroying their peoples and happiness. Australia, where happiness goes to die. Is it the bugs? It might be the bugs. They have some pretty scary freaking bugs down there. Apparently the bugs aren't the only thing killing people. Their government is too. That was a bit of a tangent. If you are old school like me, and I'm not going to say how old, just that I was out till 11 last night, which was way past my sad adult bedtime. He passed. So I'm a little out of it right now. I'm not quite all here. But we're going to get through this. You know the best place to find knowledge is in books. Not the internet, books. If you read books for yourself, then you are in control of the knowledge that you learn, not the teachers who are trying to teach you what to think, not how to think. Last month, we spent a hellish time voyaging through what happens when the left gets all of their evil little heart's desires and install a gulag system a la socialism in Russia. And how did we learn this? By reading Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago. That was depressing. We're going to do it again this month. Turns out those same tricks are used by the extreme right and the extreme left when we started last month's book. But this week / month, we're going to do The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. Jesus Christ. By William L. Shire. This thing, as you can see, is massive. It is 1,250 pages. Now, like the last 100 of those are indices and everything else. But it's still 1,147 pages. While the Gulag Archipelago is broken down into 3 bite-sized books, so I was able to read one a week. This is not broken down into 3 bite-sized books. It is, however, broken down into 6 parts. I mean, he calls them 6 books. Fine, whatever. I'm going to cover 2 books per week. So this week we have books 1 and 2, covering the introduction of the Nazi Party, how this party rose to preeminence in Germany, and what exactly is Nazification. Starting at the beginning, Adolf Hitler was born April 20th, 1889 to Alois and Clara Hitler in Braunau am Inn, Austria. Not even German, he was Austrian. He was kind of a lazy kid. I mean, he did not like to work. He did not care for school. His father pushed a lot for school because his father wanted him to be a civil servant. Adolf, isn't that weird, didn't want to be a civil servant. He just wanted to rule all around him. Didn't want to do the work, just be on top so he didn't have to work, which, I mean, I get it. I want to be on top so I don't have to work. But unlike Adolf, I'm trying to actually trace my knowledge to do that. Anyways, when his father died, Adolf, instead of getting a job to help his mother make ends meet, flunked out of school and refused to work. In fact, I don't think he ever worked a day in his life prior to becoming Chancellor of Germany, and even then he didn't really do the work. He kind of kicked the can down the road and let other people do it for him. He did try to be an artist in Vienna, but was told no by the Academy. Basically, he just didn't have the chops for it. They recommended that he try the architectural school. Weirdly, having left high school before graduating, he was not eligible to go to architectural school. So I'd like to say stay in school, but our school system sucks here in America. We're not first in anything, and the teachers are far more interested in indoctrinating students than they are in actually teaching them. So parents, homeschool. Seriously, highly recommend. He failed out of school, was unemployed, and more than anything, he wanted to be German. He thought the German Empire was fantastic, the best thing that ever happened, and that Austria was just kind of a subcategory to that, not really the place to be. So he hopped over the border, pre-passport days, didn't matter, and began living in Munich. There, he did serve in the German army during World War I. The Austrians tried to pull him back and say, hey, you have to serve for us. You know, you're of a required enlistment for being Austrian. But he pushed back and said, no, I don't want to do that. And I don't think that it was cowardice because he did enlist with the German army during World War I. And the author doesn't think it was cowardice either. He points out in there that the reason he believes, and I would agree with this, Hitler didn't want to join the Austrian army is the Austrian army sort of had open ranks. So everybody served together, which means he could be serving next to Slavic people and Jewish people and all these people that he even then considered to be subhuman, and he didn't want to do that. He wanted to join the racially pure army of Germany. So don't get, dude, we literally all came from the same spot. I mean, humanity evolved, but whatever. Racists are stupid. He joined the German army in World War I and won 2 Iron Crosses, 1 second class, 1 first class. So, like I said, he wasn't a coward, lazy, but not a coward. After the war ended, he's kind of slumping around Munich, looking to do something, not sure what he wants to do, and he comes across the German Workers' Party, which only had 6 members. Hitler became the 7th. I don't think history would argue with me when I say it would be better if he had died in the trenches. I mean, the German Workers' Party might have just fizzled out and never happened, but, I mean, you will never know, right? There's no way to go back in time and see. Once he joined the German Workers' Party, his 2 natural talents came forth and really shone. I mean, he was, one could argue, a born politician. He had a genius for organization and for speech making. And these were quickly recognized by the German Workers' Party. Germany, post-World War I, was a bit of a clusterfuck, all right? And it was all over the place. When America rebelled and came back as a republic, it was by the choice of the citizens. Some of the citizens. But still, they were ripe and poised and ready to be their own nation. Germany was not given that choice. They had 1,000 years of monarchy, and post-World War I at Versailles, they're told that's not an option. You don't get to be a monarchy. The Hohenzollerns are out. You're going to be a democracy. Welcome to democracy, folks. Now, if you've been paying attention at all to anything going on in the Middle East, just declaring a democracy does not tend to work so well. And it did not work well in Germany. The Weimar Republic was essentially forced on the people that had been monarchists by choice and by design their entire history. I don't think it necessarily didn't work because the German people wanted to be ruled over, so much as this sudden shift in policy left a power vacuum, and there was quite a delay in filling it. The constitution that was written for the Weimar, or that the Weimar Republic wrote, was quite good. All right, it allowed for a lot of contingencies. It left a lot of things. It closed a lot of loopholes so that it could be effectively run. But the big loophole it left open was this ability for anybody who was sitting in the Reichstag, anybody, could call a vote of no confidence at any time, for any reason, on the Chancellor and the cabinet members. And that would destabilize everything because suddenly new elections have to be called. This is important because this was Hitler's pathway in. Now, into this power vacuum, Hitler's star starts to rise. Slowly. There were some bumps in the road. It wasn't like, boom, he's there. His first major bump, and he was building up a following in Munich. He wanted to unite Germany, but the powers that be in Munich, which the 3 main people running Munich at the time were Gustav von Kahr, who was the state commissioner of Bavaria. Bavaria is the state in which Munich sits. Colonel Hans von Seisser was the head of the state police in Bavaria, and then we had General Otto von Lossow, who was the commander of the Reichswehr. These were the 3 guys basically running Munich, and they wanted to, Munich and Bavaria, they wanted to split Bavaria off and create their own nation, not part of Germany. Hitler didn't want that. He wanted to unite all of Germany under, him, because he was Hitler. I guess that's reason enough. Hitler kind of got wind of this because of all of his connections. Like I said, he was a very effective organizer, very effective speaker. So November 8th, 1923, he tried to take over the government in Munich, basically with the intention of making sure that it didn't leave Germany. And so he found out these 3 men were at a beer hall. He found out they were at this beer hall, and he went in with some of his Sturmabteilung, which are basically the brown shirts that we hear so much about, especially when you're comparing them to Antifa, because God, are they similar. He went in with them, grabbed those 3 men into a private room and said, hey, I'm taking over. I'm going to be in charge. You're going to do what I say, and you need to agree with this right now. And the 3 guys said, no, we're not. Not sure why you think we would do that. So Hitler, thinking fast, runs out into the actual beer hall where everybody else is and says, hey, I've just formed a new government with these 3 guys. They agreed to it. We're all going to be our own nation state, and we're going to take over Germany. And the beer hall erupts, and everybody's happy because someone's stepping in and taking control. So this was his planned coup d'etat. What happened is, as the party starts to break up, the Nazis started to kind of corral the other city leaders with the intention of solidifying their takeover. But news reached the beer hall that the actual army and the city police were fighting back outside, that they were aware something was not right, and they were fighting back. Hitler's kind of going out to deal with that, and in this confusion of news coming in, news going out, people are leaving, and then the brown shirts are trying to make people stay, Laushaus and Carr were able to slip away, and the putsch fell apart. Hitler was ultimately captured and tried for treason. Now, obviously, here in America, trial for treason is bad and usually ends with, at a bare minimum, a life sentence in a very dank prison where you never again see the light of day. In post-World War I Weimar Republic, Hitler was sentenced to 5 years in prison, eligible for parole after 6 months. Apparently, treason just wasn't that serious until Hitler took power. While he was in prison, he began writing Mein Kampf. If you've ever read even a little tiny snippet of that, it's pretty horrifying. It's so blatantly one-sided and off that several years ago there was, and this was brilliant, I'll have to include a link to this because it was pretty funny, there were a group of professors, graduate students, I don't even remember all the details, but basically they were trying to prove how one-sided peer-reviewed research was. So they took passages that, actually I think they took the entire Mein Kampf word for word and substituted Jews for white men, and it got peer review passed as being totally legit. So take that for what it's worth. That's kind of an indication of just how bad our educational system sucks these days. Now, after his time in jail, Hitler determined that he was going to take over Germany, but he was going to do it legally, using the constrictions of the German Constitution to strangle the Republic. It's exactly what he did. When Hitler was released from jail after the beer hall putsch, the economy was in recovery. Basically, you would think his window had closed. The runaway inflation that had been destroying the country was under control. American investors had been loaning money to Germany, and as a result, the Deutsche Mark had stabilized. The Republic had been borrowing money to make its reparations payments. Unemployment was down. Social services offered were considered world-class. Everything that Hitler had banked on to make the Nazis so appealing was essentially fixed. There was nothing left for anybody to do. At this point, the Nazi Party was basically a joke in Germany, and if it was referenced at all, it was to laugh at Hitler and his failed putsch. Hitler, however, was not just a compelling speaker. He was an organizer. Yeah, you hear the words community organizer, that should turn your blood to ice in your veins. He was pretty sure the good times weren't going to last, so he began planning, and his intention was to form a state within a state. And I mean literally a nation within the nation. So he started building up the Nazi Party membership. And he was very efficient at what he did. He created 2 planning groups. One was set to attack and undermine the government. The second was to establish the state within a state. So the first one, which was attacking and undermining the government, handled foreign affairs, labor unions, and the press office, not including propaganda, which was its very own section. The second one handled agriculture, justice, national economy, interior, and labor. So basically everything internal, everything external. Okay. What this particular division of labor meant is that if somebody called the Nazi Party with a question of how they would handle justice or the economy, they could be directly routed to the correct point of contact and their policies explained very clearly. That very efficient dissemination of information that was exactly what they needed to help them on their way. Now, security was handled externally by the Sturmabteilung, those brown shirts we talked about earlier. They were basically the bully boys of the Nazi Party. They were set out to create chaos and break up political meetings of parties that disagreed with the Nazis, just exactly like Antifa. So you idiots who think you're anti-fascist are actually fascists. So, well done. Congratulations. Internal security, meaning loyalty to the party from an internal angle, was handled by the Schutzstaffel, or the SS, aka the Black Shirts. The SS so far have not been mentioned too much. I'm pretty sure they're going to play a much larger role during the next parts of the book I read. All of this happened between 25 and 1931. This was the buildup. Hitler spent 6 years getting everything organized and ready to fall into place. In 32, by 1932, the Great Depression had swept the world. All right, now remember when I said that the Americans had been lending money to the Germans? Well, when the bottom fell out of the American stock market, it took a few years, but by 31, 32, it had fully hit Germany, and they were deep in the depression with the rest of the world. And this was Hitler's chance. So all that time he spent organizing paid off when elections were held and the Nazis swept 230 seats in the Reichstag. Now, this was not a majority, which is what they need to truly rule, but it did make them the largest party in the Reichstag, all pulling in the same direction. And they got some of the other parties to join with them, and they started calling votes of no confidence. That's that destabilizing technique I mentioned at the very beginning. So they would call no confidence on the chancellor, and new elections would be held. And this started failing because the Nazi party, people weren't dumb, all right? The people who were voting and living in Germany at the time were aware that it was the Nazis causing this destabilization. And they actually started to lose some votes and lose a few seats. Not much. They still had the clear majority, but Hitler sort of realized this isn't going to be a long winning tactic, and so he started to wheel and deal behind the scenes, basically, and created a coalition government with the just previous Chancellor Van Papen. I know that's his last name, and I can't remember his first name. I think it was Ernst. There's a lot of Ernsts here. I could be wrong. They formed a coalition government, which was going to be composed of 3 members of the Nazi Party, Hitler, and then 2 of his lieutenants, and then 8 other people from the other parties, basically. And they went to President Hindenburg and said, hey, we have a coalition government set to be the Reichstag, set to be the Chancellor and the cabinet, and then the Reichstag. So if you will just appoint us, we'll go ahead and stabilize the government. And Hindenburg did. So on January 30th, 1933, Hitler is sworn in as Chancellor of Germany with a coalition cabinet, no clear majority in the Reichstag, but less than a month later, the Reichstag burned. Isn't that suspicious timing? I mean, there's no doubt the Nazis did this themselves, that they went into the Reichstag and set the fire and were clearly responsible for this. Now, we know this now because of documents that were uncovered during Nuremberg, the Nuremberg trials after the war. At the time, the Nazis were very quick to blame the communists. The communists did this. This is totally a communist takeover. They did this. It didn't help that there was one communist, poor guy. Like I feel like I read in there that he was mentally handicapped, but he stepped up and said, yes, I'm a communist, and yes, I burned the Reichstag, and he was actually found there shirtless trying to start a fire. It wasn't where the rest of the building was burning, but he claimed responsibility, and that didn't help. Essentially, they used this fire to wrest absolute control from the President Hindenburg and the Reichstag, because manufacturing crises is how authoritarians take control. Should recognize that from our own experiences in the 21st century. The day after the fire, be February 28th, 1933, Hitler convinced Hindenburg to sign a decree suspending civil liberties. Let's see how familiar this sounds. Restriction on personal liberty, on the right of free expression of opinion, including freedom of the press, on rights of assembly and association. So all of those things gone. Okay? Violation of privacy, postal, telegraphic communications. They can basically search all of those things without delivering them to you and arrest you based on what they find. Special. Warrants for house searches, orders for confiscations, as well as restrictions on property are also permissible beyond the legal limits otherwise prescribed. Weird, right? Does that remind you of anything in America's recent history? Say the last 19 years? Just saying. As soon as he had power to legally do whatever he wanted, Hitler shut down the Communist Party. He shut down anyone who was even a little critical of the Nazi Party. Soon, radios only broadcast the Nazi ideology. How soon, you might ask? Well, Hitler received the authority to do all of this on February 28, 1933. By July 14, 1933, the Nazi Party was the sole remaining political party in Germany. That was it. You were a Nazi or you were not represented. And even then, not voting Nazi was a very bad idea for your prolonged health. 4 months, 2 weeks, and 2 days. That's all it took for the Nazi Party to wrest complete control away from the people. A year later, June 30th, 1934, we have the Night of the Long Knives. It sounds very dramatic, right? This was the night that Hitler started removing internal opposition to his control. But really, I think he was just removing the dirty secrets from the Nazi Party past. Basically, this was a purge of the Storm Up Thailand, the brown shirts. The leader, Ernst Röhm, had been pushing for a year to combine the military with the brown shirts under his control. Apparently, and I had never heard this before, Röhm was gay. Now, I'd never heard that before. It's repeated multiple times in this book. Kind of get the feeling the author himself, based on his descriptions of unnatural urges, was a bit of a straight-lace himself. But, I mean, this was something that was known to Hitler. So assuming it's true, Hitler knew this. Röhm had been one of those first party founding members. He'd been Hitler's friend for a decade at this point. That they had raised up the party together. And this was, I mean, it was known, right? And for somebody pushing that hard right sort of Christian line, that's a no-no, right? Sex is for procreation, and it's every good German woman's job to bear a child and propagate the Nazi race. And, well, men can't do their part for that if they're, stooping each other. So Hitler and the Schutzstaffel, because that's the SS, the internal control arm, arrested and summarily executed at least 150 brown shirts in this purge. Now, about that sort of Christian conservative line, the Nazis were nominally Christian, except they did not believe in Christ as a savior. Their savior was Hitler. Their Bible was Mein Kampf. I mean, literally. Culture, press, radio, films, education, everything was taken over by the left. Well, I mean, by the Nazis, by the right, in less than 4 months. That's how fast a nation can fall when its people fall asleep at the wheel. I mean, never forget, they work for us. We are not their subjects. They do not rule us. They are elected, and we can take their jobs away from them at any time by voting them out. This is why the democratic process is so important, okay? That Nazification of Germany, they literally took over everything. Religion was out. They even persecuted the Christians, not like they did the Jewish people, right? They persecuted the Jews into non-existence. But Christians, the ministers and priests were all required to swear an oath of allegiance to Hitler. And they were only allowed to teach things from Mein Kampf. I mean, the Bible was not considered the holy book because Christ was not the savior. Hitler was. Culture was, basically, if it wasn't... Well, first off, if any culture that was promulgated by a Jew was right out. So, Einstein, Freud, boom, they're no longer of any interest, and they were forbidden. They burned books. That's famous, right? We all know about the book burning in Berlin in 1934. I think it was 1934. But books, there was a dearth of culture. I mean, all books were essentially Nazi propaganda. People stopped reading. Radio was only playing Nazi propaganda. Newspapers, the press, all of the papers essentially printed the exact same thing, whatever they were told to print by their press corps. Was that Goering? I think it was Goering who was the press corps. It might have been Goebbels, but they didn't print what wasn't approved. One poor editor overheard the Nazi party leaders when they were delivering their daily press briefing say something like, oh, if only all the news weren't so same, and he made a quip about, well, I mean, let us print something different, and he vanished into a concentration camp. The concentration camps existed from 1933 on, right? They were pretty much used initially for political prisoners. Sound familiar? Yeah, political prisoners. A lot in common between fascism and communism. A lot of similarities. So the 58 political prisoners were kept in concentration camps. I mean, obviously, eventually that branched out, and that's where they started shipping anybody of Jewish heritage, but they were there from the very beginning. Art had to be approved, which meant it was basically boring. Anything that might make you think, anything creative, anything that was not approved was out. Sound familiar? Sounds a lot like, well, you can't display that artwork. That was done by a white man. We can't display that artwork. That was done by a Jew. Is there a difference between those two things? Because I don't think there is. And I mention that because I read some articles a while back about an art museum in San Francisco getting canceled by the Sturmabteilung because they wanted to present artwork that was done by a white man. And that's verboten when you're a screeching idiot on the left who thinks that white men are evil, or a screeching idiot on the right who thinks Jews are evil. Same thing, guys. Education, they did this thing where you couldn't teach unless you were a member of the Nazi Party, and you had to have a really strong political backing, sort of like how they're not letting people into master's programs here in the United States unless you have a strong DIE statement. DIE statement? Diversity, inclusion, and equity. If you don't have a strong DIE statement, your projects will be canceled. If you don't have the right political ideology, if you're not a firm, stolid Nazi, you're not going to be allowed to teach or to take that class or to go to school. You don't have to be on the right to be a fascist. You just have to have your head shoved so far up your ass you can smell your freaking diaphragm. All right, that's it. That's it for this week. The parallels between Nazi Germany and the leftist takeover here in the United States, and I am saying leftist takeover, all right? And I'm not talking about liberals. There are people who are liberals who are left of center, and they're totally cool. I'm talking about the extreme diehards on the far left who think that Antifa is not a thing, or if they are, they're anti-fascist, and so they can't possibly be fascist because we all know that it's just a name, right? The ones who think that this die cult is a normal thing and a good thing and part of life, you guys are part of the problem. And people who don't speak out against it are part of the problem, because this is 4 months, guys. 4 months. That's all it took to lose a nation. That's it for this week. I'm done. Join me next week when we see how Germany weathered World War II. I mean, I like our odds. I feel like we got a good chance against the crazy. At least we did back in the 40s. Now we're just kind of losing to apathy. If you like what you saw, hit that subscribe button, share my video, let me know what you think in the comments. I will see you all next week. Later.